welcome back everyone to another episode of the Cellar podcast. We got myself, Andrew, Christian, Dr. Michael Morbius, and Count Orlok. And for the people who understand the deep cut vampire reference of Count Orlok, props to you. Christian, how you doing?
Good, yeah. I think we were kind of discussing before, definitely our best backgrounds by far.
I think so. I think they're pretty funny.
Got a really deep reference that only the OGs will remember. And then, as you put it, some great trailer bait that was very intriguing shot in the trailer that, I don't know, we only saw like 20 times. And then just to be completely taken out of the movie and not referenced, something I think we were all looking forward to seeing how this connected to the other Spider-Man movies, but we'll get into that, I'm sure.
We will.
No, definitely some great background. So hopefully we'll keep it up and try to keep one-upping ourselves.
Yeah. And as you can probably tell from the title of the video, we're going to be talking about Morbius, the movie that was supposed to come out in 2020 and then supposed to come out in 2021. And now 2022, we finally get to see the movie. But Christian also had this idea the other day that we could also talk about the problematic anti-hero, as I wrote it in my notes, and the problem with modern media's glorification of the idea of the anti-hero. And it's not just something that Marvel does. I mean, DC is probably the biggest contributor to this. And it's not necessarily a thing that I dislike. I mean, part of some of my favorite iterations of characters like Batman are when he's a general anti-hero. But we'll get into that as well. And maybe talk about Morbius a little bit in that context.
Yeah, I think we should try to, get the quick stuff out of the way, which won't be very long because I think we have similar reactions about Morbius.
We'll give a review of Morbius right now. And just as a general warning, I mean, we're going to talk about it with spoilers, even though the director of the movie legitimately talked about spoilers on his Twitter page the other day, which I looked at before I saw the movie.
You basically last week came into work and told me the whole plot of the movie from that guy leaking everything.
I looked at the tweets.
It was a movie I know we were very semi interested in seeing, and like I said, I just think the intrigue for me was just seeing those shots of the Oscorp from the Amazing Spider-Man universe, and then the clear picture of Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man with Murderer on it. So you're very confused and want to kind of find out how they connect the dots, if they do even, and just go into the movie, I guess, with very little expectations, but at least interest in seeing how they're going to tie all that in. And for me to just, as you told me the other day, they took all that out of the movie. So that brought my own interest levels down to really in the negatives. It was Tuesday, $5 Tuesdays. It was basically free because I had rewards. So I just looked at it as a fun time going to the movies because first thoughts for me, I seriously have not seen a worse movie since I think Malignant, that we talked about with our year-end review, how just god awful that movie was. And
Malignant.
If it wasn't for the simple end credit that I knew was coming, which again we'll get into with Vulture, and Michael Keaton's character just getting thrown in there at the end. He was in the trailer, also something of interest, like how is he connected to
but that scene with him in the trailer wasn't in the movie.
No, it wasn't. Like every interesting thing that attracted me to this film just got completely ripped out, and I'm like, I wanted to see that movie. I still kind of want to see what that movie was and why they decided to take all that out. Maybe I think it was because of the simple fact the dots that he was trying to connect just weren't going to connect. And maybe it was because of this movie getting continuously delayed that had something to do with it. But I mean, my God, I have not read or seen anyone say this movie was even good, quite frankly. But I was I honestly, I think gave up like the first 15 minutes. I was like, all right, I'm done. And I just had some good laughs in different parts, but yeah, it was, definitely a letdown. I was not expecting much from it, to say the least, but I was definitely, I don't know, expecting to have some higher level of enjoyment than I did.
Yeah.
And it just, I do not see how they can really go forward with this universe, and how it even ties into the other Marvel movies, or Venom, and guess the Marvel Sony verse, I guess we can phrase it. But
I mean,
yeah, it's just a very unnecessary film.
it connected to Venom by reference,
Right.
because
Yeah.
he says obviously that I am Venom, um, but also the two FBI, are they FBI agents, the two
I think so. Yeah.
detectives, whatever they are, said, oh, it's better. It's just as good as that thing we saw in San Francisco, which was Venom. That's what
Right.
they're referencing. So, like, sure, it takes place in the Venom universe. That's great. Like, I could have figured that out just because it's all Sony properties. But
Yep.
I mean, I didn't like it. It really
I mean,
wasn't great.
it begs a question, like, the age old question: was there a need for this movie?
No, and there never was. Even when it was announced, there never was.
Yeah. I I mean, to be fair, I knew little about the character, and that also kind of was somewhat appealing to me. Like, oh, I've never even heard of Morbius. I know he's a Spider-Man villain in the comic books, turn anti-hero, that type of thing. But yeah, I never even heard of him, so I wanted to at least see this movie just for that, to see, a character story origin.
Yeah, of course.
It is semi Marvel, so I had some faith. I mean, nobody this day and age can fully trust Sony, but yeah, like I said, just all those, cool little bait triggers in the trailer was very intriguing, and that definitely garnered my interest level to go and see this film. But yeah, I mean, to say it was a letdown is just for sure putting it lightly.
Yeah.
Even though I was not expecting much, I don't think you were expecting much. I don't think anyone going to see this movie was expecting much, especially, after learning the fact the director basically spoiled the whole movie, and
Yeah,
said
he
that
did.
all these shots, all these takes, and everything in the trailer is not going to be in it. I mean, the fact that they clearly wanted Adrian Toomes to have a bigger role in this film, right? And just from the trailer,
Yeah,
and
but
I mean,
I have to think that, I mean, this movie was first scheduled to come out, I think, mid 2020. So now I'm thinking to myself, okay, mid 2020, what would they have done? I mean, the multiverse in the MCU wasn't even a thing yet, right?
right?
I mean, when did
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's why it it just doesn't, nothing really adds up, and it's kind of, I don't know, a shame we didn't get that movie. That maybe that's what they wanted to do all along, and then again, because it was delayed, maybe, I don't know, plot wise, story wise, character wise, like it didn't make any sense, so they just scrapped everything kind of last minute. And then, as you see in the end credit scene, Adrian Toome reappears from one jail cell to another one, and there's a quick, stupid, corny joke. He's like, I hope the food's better in this joint.
yeah.
Quickly ends. I'm like, all right, that was very unnecessary. And then the second one, Morbius is driving out to like the desert, and you see, Adrian Toomes in his vulture suit, like approaching him, and he
But
wants to form.
it's a different vulture suit, the director said, which begs me the question, where did he get it? Because he wasn't the one that made it in Spider-Man Homecoming.
Right. So, I
But
mean,
you also have to
maybe just,
remember that there was an end credit scene in one of the Amazing Spider-Man movies with a vulture suit in it.
yeah. So to me, it just seems like, I don't know, one, two, or three different scripts, and they tried to like throw in
Yeah,
all of them
exactly.
to make it to make it work in the end. Just, given the constant delays this movie had, and like I said, we were joking last night, but I mean, my God, over the last 2 years, we probably saw this trailer every single movie we've gone and
Just
seen
about,
in the
yeah.
theaters.
It's a lot.
So it was just always in our face, and we're like, yeah, I guess we're gonna see it. And yeah, it just it was not good. I mean, I think it was so like distracting, and just, I don't know. I don't know what other word to use besides like awkward when he's like honing in on his environment and using that, like, I don't know, bat radar, as he
Echolocation.
calls it, echolocation and bat radar, I
Echolocation.
think he keeps calling it. And it was honestly just laughable. And our friend Kyle, was laughing. Granted, he was making jokes, with the twins, but
Mm.
that should just say it all. Like, nobody was on board. Before the halfway point, everyone was just completely jumped ship, and it just became kind of a laughing fest.
Yeah.
Which is honestly, it's kind of sad, because when I first, when I first saw this and saw those cool things in the trailer, I was, interested, and just, I guess we'll never really know why they were scrapped. And I mean, at this point, it sort of, as all these movies do with the end credits, they intentionally, end on a cliffhanger. But I would not be surprised if, because of how badly received this movie's been, they don't even continue this mini branch out of a universe.
Yeah, I agree with that. I find it hard to believe that Sony will greenlight a sequel when they find out how much money this movie didn't make. But I will say I do have to give it a little bit of credit, because it wasn't totally horrendous, I don't think.
Yeah.
I mean, Jared Leto was good in his role. Matt Smith was good in his role. I mean, I can't really say anything bad about them. It's just that, like you said, the poor script really just didn't give them much to work with in terms of character or story. I
Right.
mean, a lot of times the characters felt sort of one dimensional. Like, they only have one path, and that's the path they
Right.
followed throughout the entire movie. There wasn't really a lot of like shifting or anything. I mean, even when you consider that Morbius and Milo have been basically brothers since they were children, there's really not a ton of internal conflict in Morbius when he's like, "Oh, I gotta kill him." It's like, well, like, I mean, there should be a little bit of, "Ooh, I don't want to, but I have to. Is there another way I can do it?" But he just
Right.
really jumps right towards, well, gotta kill him. And then, so yeah, I mean, like, they were good, but it's just there was nothing much they could have done more so than what they already did, and I think that was
Right.
part of its downfall.
Yeah. I mean,
I did really like the fog trail effects whenever he was using his power. I just thought they looked really neat. Everything had that like little kind of hazy
yeah.
after effect to it. That was it was really cool. And I mean, maybe you could make the argument that it was overdone because it was like every time they were using their powers, but I really liked that part. I was just staring at them the whole time when he was using his powers. And at the same time, the film really used colors in a really extravagant way, I think. Like making the fog trails different colors based on what item they were coming off of. There was a lot of purple fog trails whenever he was flying, and differentiated himself from the other trails from other items. And even when you go into his lab in the Horizon Labs, it was all like blue tinted that really made certain items stand out, especially when he goes into the blood freezer. You can specifically see the difference between artificial and real blood just based on the blue lighting and the background and everything.
You're
So I
right.
mean, like, there were some things I liked about this movie, but overall it felt just like a weak attempt at a superhero movie. But
Yeah.
maybe that has to
That's
do
a good
with
way of putting it.
expectations that were set because of the trailers. I mean, I can't really say, but like I said, like, the movie was supposed to come out 2 years ago, and like, you can't come
Right.
out with this movie 2 years ago. I mean, you kind of could,
No,
but
not at all.
with Venom and the Vulture, it's like, how do you make this 2 years ago? So
Yeah.
I think it was just a really, almost like a real jumbled project. Like, I'd love to see the writers room in this movie at Sony when they're trying to make it work during the pandemic, and like how many different ideas are thrown at the wall and how many different ideas just got put in the movie because they could.
Right. And I think that's sort of been, not like an ongoing trend, but we kind of talked about that with Shang-Chi, right? Like, it almost seemed like everyone in
Mhm.
the writers' room got a say in the movie, and they just
Right.
threw a bunch of ideas together, and there was no cohesiveness or, congruent plot. It was as I always say, a phrase I would say, it was very all over the map, and that's kind of how this movie felt. And that's a
Yep.
good point you said. Like Morbius really had no internal, really external conflict. I mean, the just on the mere basis, like I said, I was asking you, and we were talking about today. You know, it doesn't seem like that disease. They never even say it. It's like people that have kidney failure and or also are stuff like can be or paraplegic or whatever,
Yeah, I mean, it might even be
disabled.
fictional. I really don't know.
Yeah, it was like it just I don't know. It was not. It didn't seem like a like someone trying to cure cancer or Alzheimer's or a way more looming disease or issue they're trying to solve. So at the same time, though, like you respect him. He grew up with this and saw people suffering and dying from it. So that's kind of how his character was born, trying to create like that artificial blood and then find a way to go past that. So I did kind of like that, even though the reason he was doing it made no sense to me, something I never even heard of. But for all I know, it can be a real thing. So kind of an odd choice to do it, but I guess you gotta make it somehow connect to vampires and bats and
Oh
blood and
yeah,
stuff
and
like
like
that. So
bloodborne diseases and everything.
it wouldn't
You're
make sense if he was trying to cure cancer or something. It has nothing really to do with blood. So
exactly. You got to keep the vampire in there a little bit. I did just think of this though. There was one part towards the beginning that I did like. Maybe not immediately, but as the film went on, you grew to appreciate it. The scene where they're children in, I guess, the orphanage. Again, they never really
yeah,
say. When Michael writes the letter to Milo or Lucian, whatever you want to call him, Michael is very concerned with Milo's well-being and saying, I'll come back for you. I'll cure us. We'll live forever. And the letter flies out the window. The bullies take it, and then Milo, like, he takes the swing at the kid with his
the
own
crutch.
crutch.
Yeah, yeah,
And I think
that
that
was nice.
that's a really valuable piece of the script because it shows immediately what kind of characters and what kind of people they're going to become. Morbius has this innate need to help people and save lives, whereas Milo is more so, he's more of the angry little brother, that's willing to
Right.
throw that punch, which we see that when they both eventually get their vampire powers. But I just thought of that. And I mean, as bad as the script was, I think that's a valuable piece that we probably shouldn't overlook.
Yeah, it definitely, like, I think any bad movie in the beginning had some good potential, but it just kind of fell flat on its face a lot of times. I kind of got a little off track earlier, but you did, like you said, a lot of the characters, they did seem very one dimensional. They weren't
Mhm.
really complex. Like Morbius just singularly wanted to cure this thing, and then once he, infected himself and realized he was a monster, he was trying to end it and basically get rid of himself. But also, he finds out, of course, Milo takes it, and then he's got to stop that. And it's just it's very like simple, and it's I don't know, it didn't I at no point was I like, oh man, like Morbius has like a serious looming threat here. Like there's no, how is he gonna overcome it? Like you just kind of knew like,
Yeah.
oh, it's gonna get solved one way or another. You never worried about that. And I think that's something crucial in any, superhero movie in general. Like when a villain appears, it's like if it's not a looming threat, then like the audience isn't gonna get on board to
Right.
find out how
Exactly.
they deal with it in the end. And and then it's like, Milo was like dancing, and it brought back memories of Spider-Man 3 and the whole Bully McGuire thing. So I
Yeah.
did get some laughs out of that. But at the same time, I'm just like, what the hell is this? Like, what is going on here? What are they thinking? And, to be fair, I think the reason it got to this point was because of obviously, yeah, the pandemic and the delays. And I think it never had a chance to again come out when it was initially going to come out. And I think if it did come out when it was scheduled to be released, I think it would have been an entirely different film.
Yeah, I agree. It would have been different. I mean, especially we wouldn't have Vulture at the end, which I guess we can just move into talking about now. The end credit scenes, I
Yeah,
thought
you
were
mentioned
like
earlier.
were the dumbest thing to put at the end of your movie
Yep.
because The reasoning behind it, again, straight from the director on Twitter. Like I might paraphrase this a little bit, but straight from the director.
Right from the horse's mouth.
Exactly. He said that because of Spider-Man No Way Home, with people traveling in between universes in the multiverse, it's totally possible that Adrian Toomes' Vulture from the MCU can travel to the Sony cinematic universe, as we call it.
Well, that's right, because I remember at the end of No Way Home, Zendaya's character she just teleported to another dimension. That was such a great ending. And then Aunt May came back, but it was really Uncle Ben.
Right, from a different universe. Well, that's the thing. That's why this explanation doesn't make sense, because if you have not caught on yet, we're being sarcastic a little bit. And the whole point of No Way Home was that characters from other universes were coming into the MCU universe, not the other way around. It wouldn't make sense, because that's not that wasn't the problem with the spell. And I mean, we're sitting here arguing magic. Okay, I get it, but seriously, that narratively, the whole point was people coming into the MCU. At no point did they mention people leaving. So just to automatically assume that people can leave the MCU and go into another universe and not have it be rectified at the end of the movie when Doctor Strange fixes the spell is just, it's just grasping for straws that aren't there. I mean, it's just, I don't know. I mean,
Well, no. So this reminds me of something you said way back when they announced, the multiverse, or hinted at it. You're like, this can become very problematic. And what I hope, because I'm definitely an optimist to your pessimist. I hope they see this and they see how much of a just train wreck this movie was and how it just made no sense. And I hope the MCU just completely distances itself from this film and doesn't try to tie it in or doesn't try to justify what that director said, because just if you think of it, then if they continue this story and somehow Morbius and also Adrian Toomes make it back into the MCU, then the whole plot point, the whole ending of Spider-Man No Way Home is now irrelevant.
exactly.
Right.
I agree.
So it's just you cannot like accept this or just say that or make that blanket statement like, oh, you just have to assume that Adrian Toomes could have no, that's not what happened. He freaking made the world forget who Peter Parker was, which caused it in the beginning. So all these villains from all these other multiverses and universes and whatever, they all went back to where they came from. That's it. Mm-hmm. It's it's that simple.
Right.
You cannot think of it more. And again, Adrian Toomes was in the MCU, so why would he leave it to go to the Sony verse, as I've phrased it? It nothing adds up. It makes zero sense.
Yeah, I totally agree. But I think part of the problem here that we haven't talked about yet is that by having Adrian Toomes leave the MCU and go to Sony's universe, it kind of inadvertently not quite undermines, but it inadvertently changes the Vulture's character for a way that's not good. I mean, part of the appeal of Michael Keaton's Vulture in the MCU, I mean, let's even just say Homecoming, right? Because honestly, that's the only movie he was in. But I always had hope for him to come back. Maybe just I wasn't hoping like this.
Right.
The whole appeal of the Vulture in Homecoming was that he knew that Spider-Man was Peter Parker, or vice versa, however you want to look at it.
Yep.
And he basically vowed to himself that he wouldn't reveal that identity because of what Spider-Man did for Liz, the Vulture's daughter.
Yeah.
So part of the interest in his character comes down to the relationship that he had with Tom Holland's Spider-Man.
Yep.
So you take Tom Holland's Spider-Man away from Michael Keaton's Vulture, and you have a hollow character. I mean, I don't understand where the train of thought is here. It takes away all the interest from the character, and just, you have the end credit scene where he's like, I think we should team up and do some good. Like, okay, does that mean good as in helping people? or good as in the bad guy definition of good is let's go rob some banks, because either way it still takes away the interest from the character because Spider-Man's not there. And you can
Yep.
make the argument that Sony's going to throw in Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man. That's great. Still not going to have the same effect because it's not the same Spider-Man. So
Right.
really, no
Yeah.
matter what you do, you've inadvertently ruined a great character.
Yeah, that's even a better point, that he was like the only one from the beginning that knew Spider-Man's true identity, and because he helped, save his daughter, and I think too, we kind of forgot save his own life at the end with the airplane and stuff.
That's right. That
Um,
slipped my mind. Yeah, you're right.
he gained like a respect for him and vowed to never reveal his true identity. So it's like, why do you take that one character and bring him into this other completely different universe to what I would think make the most sense, make a team to attack Spider-Man? Because like, what are they going to be, the anti-hero squad, something for the greater good?
Yeah, I mean, if you have a Sinister Six movie without Spider-Man, why even have a Sinister Six movie? Like, who's the villain that's going to go up against a Sinister Six? Who? I mean, nobody.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, I just think, like I said, this movie I think had a lot of intrigue and a lot of good things going for it in the beginning and early stages, and when it was again initially set to come out. But man, from somewhere between the beginning of the pandemic and now, it's just a lot got thrown against the wall and a lot got thrown out the window, and they just redid the script, did some reshoots to maybe try to make it correlate and make sense to what recently has been going on in the MCU. Because even though it is a Sony film, like Sony is now kind of, because of the connection with Venom being, not being but being in No Way Home, which we all would have liked to seen him be there a little more, but there's now that tie-in, is my point, to this,
Yeah,
to
there's a
Sony
connection.
films and the MCU. So maybe that's why they redid and made this film the way they did. They thought it would make the most sense, again, as I keep saying, like connecting the dots wise speaking. But yeah, this film, just definitely fell flat in its face, and again suffered from keep getting pushed back because of external circumstances. But yeah, there was nothing good going for this movie, or nothing that makes me say, oh, I'm really interested in seeing the sequel.
Yeah, I
hope
agree
for
with
the MCU sake, I just hope they completely, as you said earlier, not give the green light to Sony to make a sequel, because
yeah.
wouldn't do good for anyone.
I mean, there was one thing, since maybe like the New Mutants, maybe a little bit before that, which we don't have to relive the New Mutants by
God
any
no,
means.
please.
But one thing I have been waiting for. What came out first, Venom or New Mutants? It was Venom, right? Yeah, because New Mutants.
Venom was
Venom was way before. So I guess since Venom, I've been waiting for this. I've been looking for like a really, like a halfway decent superhero comic book centric horror movie. And I mean, I thought Venom could do it, didn't do it. I thought New Mutants could do it, didn't do it. I figured Morbius might be a good character for it because like vampires, horror, they're kind of synonymous.
Yeah.
Didn't do it. I mean, there are scenes in all of them that do it a little bit. Like in this one, there was the hallway where the lights kept flickering and the monster kept coming and coming.
Yeah, and the ship scene too was pretty.
Yeah, so I mean, there are elements. I think Morbius is a good one. So maybe if they wanted to make a second one, maybe we could do it like all horror, and that would be really cool.
Right.
I don't think they will, but it's something I always hope for, is a good horror comic book movie.
Yeah.
Like real superpowers and everything. Like, do it up. I mean, the horror you can create with superpowers, supernatural powers, cosmic powers, everything. They're fantastic. But I will say, I really did not like the vampire design in this movie. It's just like,
yeah, I did think it was it was cute. Like sort of towards the beginning when Michael Morbius, he was like talking to Milo in the park, and he had his jacket like tilted up like a vampire. Like, I don't know if you noticed that, but it was funny. And then also the Lost Boys reference you picked up on. I mean,
two of them.
like we said, there was a couple few like funny, decent moments that I think kept it from being complete dog shit.
Yeah, like when the
Um,
investigator plops down the holy water on the
right?
interrogation
Yeah, yeah,
table.
yeah. Yeah, it was like I said, if they were going for a comedy, like they should have just went full out comedy. And then, like you were saying, if they wanted to go the horror route, I think either way, I would have liked this movie much better. But they tried to like mix in both, and it just that never works out.
Yeah,
But yeah, I agree. Like the vampire designs here were just they weren't scary, they weren't realistic, they looked very fake and overdone.
yeah. And for
It
me, I think I don't even know if that's a knock on the movie. I think that's just like a personal preference thing. I just really I
right.
wasn't feeling the vampire design.
Yeah, I never really thought of it because it was just a lot of other forefront issues that I had with it. But now that you bring it up, yeah, it was just there for me. Like it didn't do much one way or
Yeah,
another. It like I said, they definitely looked a bit over the top and very unrealistic.
yeah.
Um,
The last little like nitpicky detail I have is that they're vampires, right? The
yeah, I
only
would think so.
the only two not I mean I guess kind of two. The two main vampire traits they have are visuals, like with the fangs and the eyes and everything, and the fact that they drink blood. But other than that, what makes him a vampire? Nothing. Like he doesn't even have the aversion to sunlight. And I mean,
Right.
I understand that kind of limits creatively the movie that you can make if your main character can't be out in the sunlight. I get that. But what I thought would have been really cool and what I thought they were going to do, which they didn't, was have him kind of be like a werewolf-esque character where, daytime comes around, he's Michael Morbius. Nighttime comes around, he's Morbius the living vampire. And I think that would have been it would have been cool. I mean, I don't know. Maybe
Andrew,
like
as you always do with
I
shitty
know, I
films,
know, I know.
you always like make them and talk about ways that they could be better, and it's like, yeah, that's again another very very good point. Like it, it just if you didn't like again without the fangs or the need for blood, and you just like sat down in the middle of this movie, had no context to what it was about. Like it would be impossible to tell like they're vampires.
Yeah. I mean,
Like
aside from the drinking blood thing, like, okay. I think maybe Morbius could have gotten a little bit more of his costume. Like, I understand like it's hard to make like a comic book costume that quickly and like narratively that quickly, but maybe just have him get like a little bit more of like a splash of red in all of his black clothes, like a touch of red just to reference
you know,
his black and red costume in the comics. I mean, that would have been cool, but I mean, the long hair on Jared Leto fit. It's just like the visuals of the face. I just was, I really wasn't feeling it.
yeah, it was
I don't
very
know.
it was just off, and um like yeah, it looked like I said fake yet like very over the top. Like they
Yeah,
were really trying to emphasize like the teeth and the blood without showing blood. It just yeah, it was I don't know. I keep hearing in my head just train wreck, and like again aside from a few of those funny moments, it just wasn't good. But the other thing I wanted to mention too was, yeah, I agree. I think Jared Leto was very good in his role, but as we always say, an actor's only as good with the script they're working with, right?
right.
So again, I just keep saying this. If I really think if the movie had come out on time, or even was not as delayed as long, I think it would have been a better movie and would have, I guess, connected everything else better than it did.
At the very least, we'd be having a very different conversation.
Oh, for sure. But yeah, bottom line, just yeah, very very disappointed, very disappointing film. I think we have that same general consensus.
Yeah,
But I'm more interested in talking about the topic you always discuss with me, and have brought up and have made me kind of think of the genre in a different way, which is the issue with current day, especially with Venom, but this trend in making the anti-hero like the hero, or making a villain sympathetic or the hero, right? Like,
Yeah.
for example, I think Venom is the best example at how not to do that and why that's an issue. Where I think is like a film like Joker, right? Like, I think it was very well done and executed there, um, because you do sympathize with this guy who's just fucked out of his mind, right? But at the end of the day, you still can kind of see the difference between right and wrong and be like, you don't. It's probably wasn't worth killing those kids in the train, even though as much assholes they were. But especially with Venom, it just I wish they just kind of went the route of either, okay, he's a hero or he's a villain, and not try to walk the line between the two,
Yeah.
because I think you can open up a lot of issues.
Yeah. And I see what you're saying, and I will touch on the Joker in a second. But if I can get out my soliloquy here that I've been thinking of
Please.
for a little while, is that the anti-hero has become this thing that's more or less glorified in public media lately. It really kind of started, I don't want to say definitively, but a lot of it started to gain traction in the 80s. And I'm talking mostly like obviously comic books,
Right.
movies, all that kind of like nerd
Sure.
culture, as I call it. But in the 80s, you have books like The Dark Knight Returns or Watchmen or V for Vendetta that have all since been adapted to films in one way or another. And that's when it kind of starts to, that's when the comic medium kind of starts to poke fun at itself in terms of the superheroes. And the way to do that is to show that they're really not good people all the time. And, they have their flaws and they have their misgivings, but they will go to many, many destructive lengths in order to get their point across, to meet their end. I marked down some movies here, just going through my letterbox list real quickly, of movies that feature anti-heroes, have anti-hero tendencies, or center around an anti-hero. Obviously, like I said, Watchmen, V for Vendetta. Obviously, you got Venom, the Joker, Suicide Squad, the first couple of Saw movies to an extent with the Jigsaw Killer, Batman and Batman vs Superman, the Deadpool movies, the new Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Captain America: Civil War to a certain extent, Nightcrawler with Jake Gyllenhaal, House of a Thousand Corpses. I mean, those are just the ones I picked out in a couple minutes. And it's also really important to note that an anti-hero is different than a tragic hero, which, to my surprise, is actually kind of what Morbius was in this one, the tragic hero. Not in the most literal sense, like he doesn't die because of his own flaw. He's a vampire, but he doesn't die because of his own flaws at the end of this movie. But he's getting there. I mean, he's thinking about locking himself in a room and dying because he doesn't want to drink more human blood. An anti-hero is really even more problematic than just creating a regular villain, because the villain knows they're bad no matter what they do, no matter who they kill, who they step on, what buildings they blow up. Like, the anti-hero knows, I mean, the villain knows he's a bad person, right? And everyone knows he's a bad person.
Yeah.
The anti-hero, however, will go sometimes to the same lengths that a villain does to achieve the opposite means. So, for example, Batman in The Dark Knight Returns, the Frank Miller book, fantastic read if you haven't read it. His end goal is to clean up Gotham City from the mutants. He wants to undermine the US government by taking out the mutants first. End goal, clean up Gotham City, right? The way he does that is one of the most brutal iterations of Batman we've ever seen, where the US government legitimately has to send Superman after Batman because Batman is just leaving so much destruction behind him. He's not caring about whose bones he has to break or what villain he has to put back in prison or how he has to put that villain back in prison. He basically paralyzes the Joker in the circus in book 3. paralyzes him enough so that the Joker can still snap his own neck. But then again, it's left unclear whether the Joker snaps his own neck or Batman snaps the Joker's neck for him.
Right. Yeah.
And it creates this thing where like you want to root for Batman, like you love Batman, everybody loves Batman, but when he's doing these awful things, I mean, nobody's going to root for the Joker in that book because the Joker is a psychopath that's just killing children at a circus. But like Batman kind of, like rides over the circus tents with his tank, and maybe it's not great. And the Batman and Batman vs Superman was sort of based off of that, where like, yeah, I love Batman, I love Ben Affleck, but like he killed a lot of people in that movie, a lot of people.
Oh yeah, he no fucks given.
And that's a whole conversation for another day. But modern media's glorification of them, of like this anti-authoritarian stance that anti-heroes have, where like, your rules aren't good enough for me, so I'm going to create my own. But like, I'm still an upstanding citizen. It's like, no, you're not, because you're not upholding the rules. I mean,
right.
I think the Joker, the film, when was that, 2019, right?
Yep.
I think that film was a really good example of how to handle an anti-hero. And I'm not saying that like writing an anti-hero into a movie or a script is bad, because if you handle it properly, it's really good. Like, look at the Joker, for example, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
As much as that movie paints him as an anti-hero, the film itself has an incredibly strong stance, and it does not waver from that at all, saying that no matter how much this guy thinks he's doing the right thing, he is not. He is a bad guy. And that stays with that from the first minute the movie opens to the minute the movie ends. Because it's almost sort of tongue-in-cheek, right? The way that it handles public uprisings and why people are following this psychotic character named the Joker. Something like Venom, for example, like you mentioned, does not take that stance, because Venom is an anti-hero in those movies very clearly. I mean, Eddie Brock wants to do the right thing. Venom wants to eat people's brains. And regardless of whether those people are good people or not, bad people or not, Venom eats some brains. I mean, and he does not care about what kind of destruction he needs to leave behind him. So that movie is an example of the problematic anti-hero, I think, because it paints Venom as a hero, but don't think about all those bad things he did in the movie, because he got the bad guy in the end.
Yep.
Exactly. It works as an entertaining narrative, but to continue to glorify that kind of character could be really bad. I mean, I don't want to be like the old geezer that says, violent movies give people ideas, but because I don't think that's the case. I think people will have bad ideas regardless of what they watch. But I mean, the glorification of that kind of character and those kind of actions because you reach a justifiable end, I think that's the inherent problem that a lot of people don't understand.
Yeah, that's definitely the case with Venom, and with Joker, I think it was played perfectly. And I mean, you don't even have to say if it was inherently an anti-hero film, or if it was just everyone kind of is aware he's a villain. It's more so you just kind of sympathize with the shit he goes through, right? And so it doesn't matter as much when he shoots those guys on the train, because the daily beating he takes and how society just shits all over him. And I think that was a bigger social message at the time, kind of just to the simple rule, like just treat everyone equally, right? But with Venom, it definitely is, like I said, it's trying to walk that line between hero and villain, and just throw the anti-hero stamp on it and say, yeah, he's great because he helped defeat the other symbiotes and stuff, but he killed and murdered and ate all these other innocent bystanders that had nothing to do with it. So that's not okay either, because a true hero is just someone who is selfless and all they care about is helping and protecting others. They put themselves last, and they would, of course, never ever break the law to get to a justifiable end. And that's just, I agree. It is something that could be problematic because even though Venom maybe didn't do outstanding at the box office, it's still, I think a lot of people are attracted to that character, right? So that does open the idea to keep creating and throwing out these film and movie ideas and just having them be anti-heroes. And I don't necessarily think it'll be like people will go on the streets and uh, you know, kill someone, but then
No,
take
of
all their
course
money and
not.
give it to the best charity. Like it's not, we're not saying that, but it's just kind of problematic, I think, in the cinema industry because I for one don't love the anti-hero story, and I think it's a very hard narrative to kind of perfect or do well. I really think, in my opinion, in the superhero genre, that's I'm not counting like House of Thousand Corpses, because it is easier to do the anti-hero story that's not based off a comic book, character.
Right. I just pulled just the ones right off the top of my head.
But Joker, like I said, I think did it so well, and it was just a much better written film, better directed film than either of the Venom movies were. So that's something to consider as well when comparing the two. But I personally always just viewed Venom as a villain. I know in a lot of comic book stories and things I haven't read, he is an anti-hero. He in some cases is even a hero, but he's Venom. Like he's a villain to Spider-Man, and
Yeah.
that's what I'd rather see than like him fight side by side with Spider-Man, but then still be murdering people and be like, "Hey, I'm a
Right.
hero.
Right.
Don't forget, I'm a hero. I'm good."
I mean,
And all those.
I've got my copy of Venom Lethal Protector hanging on the wall right there. I'm looking right at it. I mean, I understand that characters evolve, right? Like Morbius, for example, I have here his first appearance was The Amazing Spider-Man number 101 from 1971. So that's like he's got time to be a richly developed character. He was villain of Spider-Man, he was villain of Blade, but more recently joined the Midnight Suns, which is a team of heroes, team of like supernatural-esque heroes. And I mean, even in this movie, like I said, to my surprise, he was more of a tragic hero. He wasn't really an anti-hero because he
Right.
wasn't really a bad guy. I mean,
Not at all.
aside from killing his friend, but his friend was a bad guy. So that's what you got to do sometimes.
Right.
Creatively, I think it also stifles interesting stories because if the anti-hero is in right now, let's say, then film production companies and comic book publishers, they all start writing all of their characters as anti-heroes. So everybody becomes an anti-hero. Nobody's really a hero. Nobody's really a villain. So where's the conflict?
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
If
I think
everyone has
that's
that,
the crux of the issue that we've
right.
talked about.
If everyone has that internal struggle of, well, I could help that old lady across the street, but she kind of ran over my dog, so I'm not very happy with her. If everyone has that conflict, then why do you want to why do you as a consumer want to consume that product?
Right.
So I mean, I think that if characters are flat heroes or flat villains, I mean, sure, that could lead to certain one-dimensional character problems, but I think that could sometimes be better. I mean, a good dichotomy between a hero and a villain, I think, is better than just an anti-hero versus an anti-hero.
Yeah. No, for sure. Because you have it's really everyone loves an underdog. Everyone loves like a hero villain story, like to root for the hero and hope the villain doesn't prevail, which of course they never do. And some people just kind of have the urge or desire to try to be like, oh, I can perfect the anti-hero story. Again, like prime example with Venom and with Venom too, like with Carnage, it's like he's in that movie, he's the villain and Venom's the hero. Like he's not even an anti-hero anymore. Like he's just a flat out hero. And it's like, okay, that like I get what you're doing and it kind of works. And just a quick aside, like I know I like that movie much more than you did, but he's already established as like an anti-hero, so it's like you can't really kind of go back and do a
Right.
complete 180 on the character you've kind of already created. It definitely creates that main issue of, you know, who knows, like they could write friggin' Spider-Man as an anti-hero someday if for all they care at this rate. And that's just something that you're like there really isn't any external conflict
Mhm.
at all, because it's really tough to have an anti-hero and then have like a villain, right? Because it's like they're
Yeah.
basically one of the same, or have an anti-hero and a hero because they're basically one of the same. It
Yeah.
just it doesn't work. There's not a universal formula that works for all those characters.
Right.
There
And
just
I
isn't.
totally understand. But I mean, even to that point, look at, like we mentioned before, Spider-Man Homecoming, right? In that movie, I would say that Spider-Man is the definite good guy, the definite hero, and the Vulture is the definite bad guy. I mean, he has
For sure.
some decent family man tendencies, but for the most part, he's the bad guy. So you have that relationship between good guy, bad guy, hero, villain, right? And by the time you get to the end of the movie, the last act, the final fight, the conflict then comes in Peter Parker being the undeniable hero of, I still have to save him. Like that's a human life that's gonna die, even though he's a bad guy. He's threatened to kill me. He's threatened to kill my aunt, all my friends, my family, whatever. But I still have to save him, and then he does. And because of that basic writing dichotomy between the hero and the villain, you have one, great character development for the hero, learning what it is to be a superhero, and two, great development for the villain, seeing what's possible when you decide to do the right thing, which he then relays in the after credits scene when he's talking to Scorpion.
Right.
But that wouldn't have been possible, like you said, if it was a hero or an anti-hero or a anti-hero and a villain, because I mean the anti-hero is too similar to both to provide, in many cases, a legitimate relationship. Unless you're Alan Moore, then you know how to write those, and all the power to you. But most
Right.
people are not Alan Moore, so
No, definitely not. And that's like the issue. It's so hard to perfect something, as good as the Watchmen. A lot of them are anti-heroes. It's tough to the Joker film will never be like perfectly replicated, again. I think any other, iteration of the Joker we'll see is just going to be as a villain, right? Because I think no one's going to really want to try to top
and I
the
kind of hope
Joker.
that's what it is, honestly.
Yeah, no, totally. Because when you say villain, I think anyone that is a fan of superhero movies like instantly pictures Joker in their head. Like he's just the perfect classic villain, right? So it's crazy to think how well done the Joker film was as being an anti-hero driven film. But I think it again, as we've discussed, like it does work because Joker's like villain is society, right? But like a villain isn't a traditional villain is like a singular person you're fighting against, right? Not
Yeah.
persons or plural.
Mhm.
So it definitely works in that case, but it's something that's just so hard to get right and do well. And I kind of hope that not like the trend dies, but hopefully people kind of see that like Venom didn't do so well. It wasn't, well received. It didn't do well in the box office. And, hopefully kind of just continue to see, traditional hero villain films. And, I could understand the argument, maybe, oh, that's kind of getting lazy and a little outdated and too traditional. But if it's, worth having freaking Superman as an anti-hero, I'm all for it.
Yeah, maybe. I don't think every character can work as an anti-hero.
No,
I was curious,
I don't. I don't know. I don't think so. But I mean, would it surprise you if they tried to in
Oh
our
no,
lifetime make
no,
a Superman or a Spider-Man or a Captain America or whatever, anti-hero driven film? It would not surprise me at all
no, wouldn't surprise me either. But
because it's something like if you look at it, like you said, it's like Alan Moore perfected it. He's one of very few that have,
yeah,
right?
Alan
So I
Moore,
think
Frank Miller.
aspiring, film writers, directors, that's like their Mount Everest. Like to some of them, like they're
Mhm.
like, how can I do this and be different? Which is a great mindset to have because it generates creativity, creative ideas, and hopefully good movies. But it's just so hard to do right. And to again, an anti-hero for any other genre is so easy, is so simple, so easy. And you know there is like a pattern of a written formula on how to do it and how to do it well. But the issue comes in when you throw in comic book heroes, comic book villains, and try to stamp that label on them. It's really tough to do. Yeah, to kind of wrap it up, it was that was a good point. I didn't really ever think of Morbius as an anti-hero. I did look at him sort of as a tragic hero, minus the fact of most tragic heroes end up dying, but in a way he kind of did die. But yeah,
But I mean,
it's tough.
narratively, I'm confused on how they're going to continue it because the whole point was that he didn't want to live till the next day because the next day the artificial blood wasn't going to be good enough and that he was going to have to drink human blood. Honey, he's still alive at the end of the movie.
Right. In the 4 hour, it went from 6 hours to like 4 hours, and then it was just permanently 4 hours from that point on.
Yeah.
When
So I don't
he
know
needed the
whether
artificial
he's just
blood.
going to like suck it up and, no pun intended, drink human blood, or I don't know.
Hopefully, hopefully for us, we never see or find out.
Maybe he and his
That's what I'm
girlfriend can
putting my
figure
money on.
something out.
Yeah, maybe.
Who knows?
But yeah, I think that was a solid discussion on a not great movie, and I think a trend that we've noticed and something we've talked about in depth about this glorification of the anti-hero. And I'm sure
I
it won't
wrote part of
be
my honors thesis
won't
on
be
that
done.
topic. Call me up. I'll talk to you about it anytime.
Oh yeah, you definitely know your stuff. But that's definitely a wrap. We got some good movies coming out that I'm sure we'll be interested in reviewing. Um,
Yeah, there's a lot of
Mar
movies coming
Mar
out lately.
Marvel speaking, Doctor Strange, I know we're both interested in seeing, so I'm sure there'll be a lot of fun stuff to dissect in that. So
Yep, I
look
think we're
out
gonna
for
go
that.
catch Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Yep,
The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, The Northman comes out soon.
of
I think
course
that's
your
it for
favorite
April.
The Nick Cage movie.
I can't wait. I can't wait. I'm so excited. I
We'll
love
have to
Nick
talk about
Cage.
that. But yeah, so as always, thank you for listening. Stay tuned. The other thing we keep teasing, we'll definitely get to it, as our top 5 film list. We kind of want to try to do that as best as we can, so that's why it's been delayed. But
We gotta do
yeah,
it soon, or else it's gonna keep turning into a bit that we're gonna say we're gonna do it and then we
yeah,
never do it.
honestly, probably will turn into that.
That's it. Thanks for watching. Tell your grandma, mailman, dog walker, your friend Aiden.
Everyone
Yeah.
send us via the mail.
Yeah, that's right. All right. Catch you guys in the next one.